Hello and welcome to a brand new series that we are starting with Envorso. This is our expert interview series. My name is Morgan. I'm the editor at Envorso, and with me today I have Steve Tengler. Steve brings over 3 decades of automotive and product development expertise to his role as VP of Engineering Excellence at Envorso, a University of Michigan alum. Steve is both an INTAX certified provisional assessor for automotive SPICE and a TÜV certified cybersecurity engineer. His very impressive career spans leadership roles at major automotive players, including general manager at Honeywell Automotive Cybersecurity, senior director at Altia, and engineering group manager at OnStar. So he's bringing a lot of insight to both the technical and strategic challenges facing today's automotive industry. I'm really excited to talk with you today, Steve.
I am too. All right, fantastic.
Wonderful. So you've worked at both traditional OEMs like Ford
Yeah.
and General Motors, and also tech-forward companies like Honeywell in the
hmm
cybersecurity division.
hmm
How do you help automotive leaders navigate the cultural transformations needed for software-defined vehicles?
Hmm. Um, I think a common element across those companies you mentioned is that they have a rich history prior to any, software-defined vehicles or really software, right? And so to some extent it requires stopping and saying, this is different. This is different. We have a century or more of history that really revolved, let's say, around hardware. And obviously the words are different, software versus hardware, but the business behind it and how you run that business is way, way different. And the ones that I've seen that struggle the most have a hubris about that. And so first of all, it takes a moment of being humble and drop the ego for a moment and and say, okay, let's research why this is really different, what it takes to do differently, right? And part of that is when you invest, when you should expect something to come out of that investment, how you just the day-to-day of running the business, right? Probably part and parcel of that, maybe second part of that is kind of um how would I say it? Like you're going to have a base organization and that has its own backlog, an asynchronous backlog, right? Especially those OEMs you mentioned, they're very used to having, we have this project. This project is this time frame. We're going to create something and it's going to launch and then we manufacture it and then we go on to the next project and we start that cycle over again. But really, it's a different mindset of imagining that you have this thing that has block points, let's say, and every so often you spit something out either to this vehicle program or to that vehicle program, and that's the thing that gets used ongoing, right? And that it's not tied to a vehicle timing, right? And then, the last is in the SDV world, I would say this is like a major item is you can't do it all yourself. No one can do it all themselves. Right? There's a massive amount of development code that has to be created and maintained. And so part of the big challenge for them is going to be not only to learn how to be, this software developer, that they're not used to being, but it's also how do I work with the folks in co-development with them in a synchronicity that allows for me to deliver to you, you deliver to me, and me get it out the door over and over again. And that requires a lot of fantastic management, project management, program management between across logos, across walls, that type of thing. So all those are fairly major. It's a big transformation that they've been talking about.
Mhm.
Uh,
Absolutely. And when I think of automotive, I think of one of our more traditional industries in our country's history, really. And obviously, there's a lot of innovation happening, but I can imagine that in those sort of traditional manufacturing companies, it takes a while to kind of introduce innovation and get everybody on board with a change to that scale. And it
yeah,
makes me think a bit of you're also an author that's published on Forbes. You write regularly for Forbes.
yeah, yeah.
And in your articles, you're often challenging that more conventional automotive thinking. So when you're talking to those C-level executives and advising them at companies like that, how do you balance being proactive with being more practical and understanding where they're coming from?
Um, well, let's start, but I'm not sure that those are contradictory, right? Part of being a consultant is that we're supposed to be blunt. We're supposed to be proactive and practical at the same time, and really maybe tell them the things that are in their employees' minds, and they just aren't I don't know, politically enabled, maybe it's not in their employees' minds because maybe they haven't seen it at multiple companies like we have, right? But part of our job is to be um, proactive and blunt. This is what you need to do now. Let's get going, right?
Mhm.
And some of it, use the word practical or to launch off of that, it is you got to meet them a little bit where they are, right? So you can say, here's the North Star you need to get to. And sometimes it's the blunt of like, no, look, we got to just chop this and go for the North Star. But sometimes it's helping them create those steps, but it's really to be blunt and let's get to the first step right now. Let's go. Right. And that's part of the daily joy.
Mhm. That's great. I'm glad you pointed that out, that those two things aren't actually in conflict. They're kind of part of the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so you've written a lot about cybersecurity failures in
Yeah.
automotive.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most either common or maybe one of the most dangerous misconceptions that you see um, among automotive executives about cybersecurity?
I, I, I don't know if it's just cybersecurity. Um, it could be true of functional safety or even software bugs in general, right? It's the balance effect of optimism bias, right? So the idea is that bad things happen to bad people, or bad things happen to people who aren't as good as I am, right? Or as good as my org, right? It's this belief that it will, a hack won't happen to us, a recall won't happen to us. We can do some of this, let's say, ship it out the door, um, and we'll get it fixed later. It won't be a problem. And that's probably it's unfortunate both fairly prevalent and dangerous, right? Um, it's not. I don't think there is the sky isn't falling kind of danger out there, right? In the across the entire industry. I don't want to say that, but there is kind of a I gotta spend now on the urgent. And cybersecurity is important, and it's tough to justify the spend, right? Because of the belief of that bad things are going to happen to us. So how can I justify that event that would happen if I don't do this spend, right? So it's a tough from a putting yourself in the moment of believing that it can happen to you, and therefore you got to spend to avoid the problem.
That's interesting. So do you see kind of like a move fast and break things sort of mentality similar to the Silicon Valley?
There definitely is that, and actually, maybe that's the pendulum. Like, people ask me, where do I see ASpice and cybersecurity going, right? And um, we're maybe at the far end of a pendulum swing on some of that, right? There's this belief that, um, hey, we can do mediocre work up front, but we'll quickly iterate and we'll get rid of that problem. And we're not seeing that, right? We're seeing a massive jump in software recalls in the industry, right? And
Mhm.
41% jump last year, right? Or 41% of all recalls were software related last year, right? That's a
Right.
big jump, right? More than a 41% jump. That has been a trend the last 4 or 5 years of this exponential growth of problems, right? At some point here, it's going to be a recognition of it will happen to me if I don't address it. the cost of addressing it is small compared to the cost of fixing it. Right? The whole idea of a stitch in time saves nine, right? We got to get there. And that pendulum's got to swing back again. It will happen, but unfortunately, a few more people have to put their hand on the hot stove, and then they'll learn. We'll all learn, right? That's how it's going to
Mhm.
happen.
Right. I think that you wrote about that recently in Forbes. You called chief software architects automotive's unlikely hero in the AI age. So maybe you can speak a little bit more about why you see that role of chief software architect being so critical, and maybe why a lot of people are overlooking it might be related to what we were just talking about.
It's a little bit related, certainly. I would say, a little bit more why the architect might be the hero is that, for one, when you have an AI, right, you've got a data lake, let's say, right, and you have something that you're training that on, or training that, for training the algorithm with that data, right? And the idea is that it is able to then take that data and slightly move beyond that data to analyze other things, right? But it isn't imagining something that totally doesn't exist for the most part, right? It's based upon something that does exist. Whereas your architect, you need your architect because they are imagining something that doesn't exist, right? And so can you get the idea, the AI to do coding? Yeah, right now, there's already AIs that do coding. Can you do it? Can you have AI that does testing? You can do that, right? But in the beginning of the systems V is the idea of what do we want to achieve, right? That isn't that requires creativity, right? And then the idea of and how might we structure this, and especially how might we restructure this in reusable pieces, that's where your architect really becomes valuable. And right, they're going to be able to help you to get to that again, that backlog of reusable code that you can use asynchronously across all your vehicle programs because now we've created something that we can build on quickly and easily. Right.
Mhm. Yeah, I would love to hear you talk about this too. I know a little bit behind the scenes. I'm still relatively new to Envorso, so this is a lot of fun for me to get to know
Good.
you and
Quite good.
the company even more. Um, I'm curious to hear you speak about how Envorso approaches this, and you're the VP of Engineering Excellence.
Yeah.
Um, how is your approach and their approach different than other consulting firms or other places you've worked? In my mind, I do think it has something to do with this software engineering excellence that's also on the team. I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So there are probably a few ways, right? Not just ex engineering excellence. I would say first and foremost, you know, you're really large consultancies without naming any names, but like let's say your top 10, right? Your biggest ones. Um, there is this land and expand concept, right? And that is you get some some lady or guy with a little bit of gray hair right here, right, and some few decades of experience, like the intro, and you have them come in and they start talking about the great things that we're going to do, and then they kind of are there, but not really, and they bring in a whole bunch of people that have just freshly graduated, that are smart, but don't have some of the right, they have intelligence, not wisdom, right? That they haven't learned everything that going to all of these companies, right? That's part of the value of the consultant being a consultant for a while, but also of having done this yourself and walked a mile in these people's shoes, is that you can walk in and say, I've lived this, I know this, I'm not making this up. And that's a difference for Envorso. We have a whole bunch of people that are experts, and that's who we're sending to your companies typically, right? But there's also the idea that it isn't one size fits all, right? Like if I'm going to land and expand with a whole bunch of people that are just fresh out of school, there has to be a playbook, right? And that playbook is this is our recipe that works for everyone, right? And there's a tremendous fallacy in that because every company has different goals, different tools, different expertise, different geographical di distribution, right? Like all sorts of variables that you can think of. There isn't one playbook, right? One size fits all almost never works, right? In the world of middle school cafeteria food, it's one thing for everybody and it tastes like crap, right? Sorry, I
Mhm.
shouldn't I took those words out in the interview. But that's the reality, right? And so usually what's interesting about Envorso, a lot of times we're coming in and cleaning up from someone else. It's very common, right?
Mhm.
Because somebody came in and pitched that idea and it failed, and now what do we do? Right? So it's a big difference between Envorso and some of the others that I've seen. Oh,
Yeah, that's another through line of what we um, talk about a lot too. Is I think one way to describe what you're saying is the Enforcer team can be agile, can
yeah,
be iterative, can be flexible, and can instead of bringing on like a pre-prescribed sort of method that it's either this way or you go get the next guy because this is what we do. I think that's really powerful, and I know that that kind of mentality is sort of another common factor in what the Envorso team does and promotes.
yeah, yeah. We do a lot of agile development too, by the way.
Hmm.
So very applicable word in the middle of your thought there. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Is that something that you think sets Envorso apart from the way other firms that you're familiar with work?
Some of the others do Agile as well. I think what's interesting about Agile, it even did it to itself, is that there's not, by definition, one definition of Agile, right? There are like five, six, seven different types of Agile, right? Scrum and Kanban are the most common. But then on top of it, it can morph a little bit in the midst of how you run it. Um, some of the engagements we've cleaned up have been Agile, right? So some are out there saying, well, agile is throwing away all processes. That's agile, which is bunk because agile itself is a process, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's really much more about how do you make commitments that you can meet, right? I I I, I honestly I've said this over and over. My wife got sick of hearing this from me in the first few months of me being a consultant. I sometimes wonder how some of these companies make a profit because if you can't make a commitment and meet the commitment, that commitment is based upon a business case, right? Based upon this is the revenue that we'll make given these costs. And so at the point where you can't make that type of commitment, then your business case kind of goes out the door. Um, it's just amazing, right? And I understand it's difficult. I've seen it firsthand in a bunch of companies. But understanding what's realistic and then delivering on that realistic, that is incredibly important to running a business. So yeah, we do a bunch of that type of engagement, and usually there's some cleanup there, and it's valuable because um, your customer expects you to meet your commitments, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yep, the
yeah,
basics.
yeah.
Do you have a favorite, without naming any specific names, of course, do you have any like favorite stories or use cases or businesses that you have worked with through Envorso that you are particularly proud of or surprised you with the result that you were able to reach with them?
Yeah, I do. Humorously, I was supposed to have lunch with them today. The one group they were missing their commitments. They had a customer that was using their logo as a swear word, essentially, and fining
Oh.
them. Yeah, and they were removed from the bidding list. And we got in there, we helped them to improve their ability to make a commitment and deliver on that commitment. They won the trust back of that customer. Customer started to say, I only want to deal with this new company, not the company I was dealing with before this, right? Um, they started having people on other projects asking to switch to their project because they saw how relaxed the people were on the project because they weren't scurrying around anymore from the chaos, right? So, it's fun. A lot of companies are fun to work with, right? You get to meet new people and stuff like that. But when you have that kind of success with a team, it makes it even more fun for even us because you see in people, a transformation of, wow, coming to work is no longer a fire drill every day,
Mhm.
right? And so, a couple of these people are retired and still want to have lunch, right? That's the kind of that's a success, right?
Yeah. I like that the example you brought up was very much about the people and the relationships too,
Yeah,
not just I mean, we have all these great metrics of how much money you can save, how much time you can save. Those are all wonderful things. But if you can also have a company that people are, happy to work at, and
yeah, yeah.
the success of the team is more than just the profit, right?
Right. And by the way, even that you can put a number on that's to the profit, right? But
Right.
yes, there's a part of it that is, right? We all have a limited life, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
written into the story, right? There's an end to the story. Let's have fun while we're doing it, right?
Mhm.
That's the goal. It should be the goal.
Yeah, I agree. We spend a lot of our lives at work. We hope to have good lives while we're there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. So I have a few questions that are more about your background, maybe a little bit less exactly what you're doing now.
Okay.
Um, but I found out through a little bit of research I did that you founded a nonprofit educational fund that's been running for 27 years.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear about that, what it is, and how leading that foundation has maybe shaped your approach to developing engineering talent or working in the corporate settings,
Mm.
maybe a little bit of a life
Mm.
balance conversation there too.
Okay. All right. Well, yes. By the way, good research. Um,
Thanks.
it's a scholarship that it's for people that have volunteered in the community despite their own personal need. And you read some of these applications, and it just makes you realize, like, wow, there are angels living amongst us, right? It's pretty impressive, right? Um, and so you were asking, how does it affect my leading people in engineering, running that org? I would say um, everybody brings a talent, right? Time, treasure, talents, right? Those are the three things of nonprofits, right? And running a nonprofit, you're never supposed to turn down a donation of some type, right? And so part of that makes you stop and look at people and say, this person has something great about them. I need to find that and help to use that, right? They're coming to me and wanting to give a gift. How do I best use their gifts toward succeeding, right? And so yeah, it's gone very well, way beyond what I would have imagined. It's an indicator of how many generous people I'm surrounded by, to be honest. Uh,
That's beautiful. So you've definitely worked with a lot of people over your career in these different worlds, and specifically, um, maybe like over 500 engineers that you've trained, which is a pretty impressive metric.
I'm sad to say it might even be double that. It's somewhere in there. Yeah,
Amazing. Yes.
yeah,
Many, many people. What would you say are some of the biggest skills gaps you see in today's workforce? You can speak maybe to the automotive engineering workforce or in general, whichever you'd like to speak to.
yeah. Skill gap. Let's start with the management. If again, I'm allowed to be blunt. I see kind of a pervasive with the management of not stopping to be realistic about goals and objectives or right sizing the organization, right? Um, Again, to be able to meet a commitment, you kind of have to know what is the right size? What is realistic for the crew that I have, right? I've had run into several management where it's just like they pound the table and say, this is what needs to go out the door. This is what it's got to be, right? And then it falls short. And then they turn around and look around and say, well, why did you let that happen? Right? Really, it requires, if you can't figure out how to right size your org, get help, right? That's the first message. I'd say the other common problem is again back to the project management is the basic understanding of estimate, plan, monitor, and adjust, right? And that can be true in really any organization, right? None of us have, we were talking earlier about, Envorso and agile and stuff like that, right? It we don't know where we want to go ever, right? Nobody has the perfect plan, right? Military say that the first thing to die in battle is the battle plan, right? But you got to figure out, well, okay, then where am I? And what do I need to do to get back on track? And that understanding of how to do those basic elements and then get back on track, it's amazingly it's woeful. It's something that the automotive industry really, really needs to focus on in order to be competitive. Right? Those companies that understand how to do that, those are the ones that are gonna win. Right?
Mhm.
Right.
All right, I think that brings me to my last question. It's kind of
All
a
right.
fun one. We've covered a
Okay.
lot of good stuff here. So you describe yourself as someone who likes non-predictable endings. How does that philosophy influence your approach in solving complex engineering problems? And how does it
Yeah.
affect your day-to-day
Well,
life? I would love to know.
yeah, I mean that's consulting almost in a nutshell, right? Every day is a new adventure. Exactly like I was saying before, right? With there isn't a playbook. There isn't a one size fits all. And so, I walk in the door into a new customer and it's something different. It's not Groundhog Day. It's not the same day every day of consulting, right? It's come in and I help figure out what's your problem and then I help you fix it, right? And that makes it every day a different fun adventure, right? You don't know where it's going to go, and you go with it, right? And that makes it fun. Uh,
I agree. I'm the same way. I enjoy I enjoy the having a day that's a little bit different every time and keeps you engaged
right,
in what's really going on
right,
around you and
right,
how to move forward.
exactly.
Right. Well, Steve, thank you for your time. I think that
Yeah,
we have enough things to talk about that we could do a whole other interview. So maybe we'll catch up with you again in a little while and see
that'd be
what's
great.
new. Um, I want to mention, and you're welcome to share any contact information you would like as well. For those who are interested in getting in touch with you, they can go to envorso.com and there is a contact form on the website that you can fill out to get a free consultation. And I know, Steve, you're also active on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere that you would like to direct people to find you?
Again, I'm good with the email too, steve.tengler@envorso.com.
Wonderful.
All
All
right,
right. Well, thank you so
great.
much for your time, and I hope to get to speak with you again soon.
That sounds great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.